Well, the White House fact sheet on the issue claims that Democrats are, quote, open border obstructionists. Well, the New York Times column points out how Democrats should combat that narrative from the White House suggesting this. The author writes, "We're not going to admit thousands of undocumented immigrants traveling in a caravan. We do not have open borders, but we are and have always been a country of compassion." So let's bring in the executive director of the Central American Resource Center, Abel Nunez, and the president of the Federation for American Immigration Reform, Dan Stein. Welcome to you both.
Glad to be here.
Thank you for having us.
Okay, so I want to play something that Vice President Pence had to say today about the situation.
Department of Homeland Security issued a statement saying, quote, "Gang members and criminals with significant criminal history are in the caravan," and that includes citizens from, I'm quoting, outside Central America, including the Middle East, Africa, and South Asia that are currently traveling through Mexico toward the United States of America. Those are the facts.
All right, Abel, so how do we vet the people who want to come here?
Well, we already have a process for vetting. Once they get to the border, everyone has a right to ask for an asylum process, and you will figure out if they have a credible fear and then begin a process of asylum. For those that don't, will be detained and returned back to the country. It is something that the U.S. has done, continues to do, and will do. Now, we have to remember that these people, in the context in which they come, is very difficult, but we're talking about at a maximum number of 10,000, depending on the numbers that you believe. I believe that the U.S. has the ability to deal with this crisis, with this issue. It's not it's part of the course of what's going on in the southern part.
Well, and Dan, part of the problem is that there's already such a huge backlog in the system of trying to, process people who are trying to come here for legal immigration. The asylum request, I mean, this stuff takes forever, and nobody seems to be cleaning up the situation here in D.C.
Shannon, it's unconscionable that after we watched what happened in Europe in 2015, that the United States Congress has not stepped up to close the obvious loopholes and manipulation that are taking place in our asylum system. Everybody in that caravan who's coming, particularly the ones bringing minors, know full well that if they get to the U.S. and ask for asylum, they'll be given a court date sometime down the line. They can disappear for years, maybe never show up, and taxpayers are supposed to pay unlimited amounts of money to go running around trying to find them. And then you have the entire Democratic Party that says anybody who isn't a violent felon or a murderer or a terrorist shouldn't be deported. So then they don't want any resources to actually go find them. So naturally, the illegal population continues to swell. Court backlogs continue to grow. Asylum becomes the method of choice to get around border enforcement. And so people are rational. They're getting into that caravan because they know precisely what to expect on the other side. The Trump administration is dealing with two hands tied behind its back because Congress has failed to deliver the goods. Build a wall, interior enforcement, asylum reform, mandatory detention, speedy process, 72 hours. Any alien who has not applied for asylum in Mexico, not applied in Guatemala, who's come through from Honduras, should be summarily returned on the next plane. No reason for this country or any country to have to entertain asylum claims for people who are shopping for where they want to live. That's not under international law. That is not a privilege you have if you believe you're a bona fide refugee.
So, what about some of those? I mean, a couple things there. The Border Patrol and DHS put out new numbers yesterday that talked about the number of people who come for claims, ultimately are turned away or disappear somewhere into the system. And what about this issue that's constantly brought up about why not stop at another country? Why cross through and come to the U.S.?
We have to understand and look at this issue from a transnational perspective, meaning that the foreign policy of this nation from previous governments have created conditions in the country that aren't tenable and unbearable. The people there are not in a caravan. They're really in an exodus. And their choice is, do we stay and die? Or do we go and try? They understand the laws of this country, and I think they know that it's not an easy task. You were mentioning before how difficult it would be for those people to undertake this trip. So it's not something that they take lightly. But unfortunately, the conditions in the country are not one that can sustain their life.
What about Mexico? Why travel, thousands of miles through Mexico and not try to stop there and seek asylum there?
Well, some of them have. There are over 100 people that have applied for asylum, and we need to ensure that Mexico is not given sort of a free pass. They need to strengthen their humanitarian protection, and this is about a humanitarian issue that is happening on our border that will end up in our doorstep. And we, as Americans, have to decide what values do we have and how are we going to treat people that are fleeing violence.
We have established that the people coming in are disrespecting the laws of Guatemala and Mexico. We've established that Mexico is not enforcing its immigration laws, allowing people to transship Mexico, not just from Honduras, but from all over the world. People coming in through Guatemala from all over the world, special interest aliens, as Vice President Pence said. This is a national security problem. And if Mexico is not going to be a full partner in enforcing its own immigration laws, we have a very big security problem with Mexico's failure to act to prevent this from happening. There's no reason that they ought to be getting on the beast and riding all the way up. Once they get inside the U.S., the ACLU will be in court. They'll find a Ninth Circuit, slip of the tongue, judge to enjoin it, and the next thing you know, there's an injunction and they're all in.
All right. Dan and Abel, thank you very much both for coming in.